I have told this story maybe 40 times now. 40 times, and every time somebody at the table stops chewing. Every time some young cadet leans forward with that look, that "you're exaggerating" old one look. And every time I do the same thing. I roll up my sleeve. I show them the mark on my forearm. 3 thin white scars close together like the tines of a fork. She didn't give me this, I tell them. I gave it to myself, trying to look away from her and hitting the rail instead, because I could not look at what she was doing. That usually shuts them up. My name doesn't matter much. I'm Thren. If you don't know what that means, it means I'm big, bigger than most of you. My people come from a world where the gravity tries to fold you in half every morning, so we grow up thick and slow and proud of it. On my homeworld, a Thren is the strongest thing in any room. At the academy, I learned that strongest thing in the room is a joke the universe likes to tell. Let me back up. Let me tell it properly, because the way you hear it in the mess halls now, it's all wrong. They've turned it into a legend. They say she was 7 feet tall. They say her eyes glowed. They say she killed him. No. She was small, her eyes did not glow, and she didn't kill anybody. What she did was worse. She let him live. And that, cadets, is the part nobody understands until they've seen it with their own eyes. You have to picture the place first. The conquered war college doesn't sit on a planet. It's a ring. A vast, spinning ring of dark metal hung in the empty space between 3 suns, so that no single member world could claim it, so that no single species could say this is ours. 200,000 cadets from 400 worlds, all packed into that turning wheel, all training to be the ones who hold the line when something out in the dark decides the galaxy looks tasty. The gravity on the ring is fake, spun up. You feel it in your inner ear if you stand still too long, this tiny, constant lean like the whole world is a ship rolling on a slow sea. Newcomers get sick. I got sick. Everybody gets sick. Everybody except the humans, funnily enough. But I'm getting ahead again. The training decks were the heart of it. Deck 9 especially. That's where the combat trials happened. Picture a room the size of a small moon's crater with a floor of black impact glass that lit up under your feet when you moved, and tiered seating going up and up into the dark until the highest rows were just glinting eyes. When there was a trial, the whole deck filled. 10,000 cadets, easy. Sometimes more. The air up there smelled like ozone and old sweat and the sweet-rot smell of the Velani cadets, who ferment slightly when they're nervous. You learn to breathe through your mouth. And there was noise, always noise. Clicking, hooting, the low drone of the Corinth war hum, the sharp whistle language of the Sift. A stadium full of 200 species does not sound like anything you have words for. It sounds like a machine breaking. It sounds like being inside a swarm. That's the world. Hold it in your head. Now let me tell you about her. The humans arrived in my 2nd year. You have to understand, nobody wanted them there. Earth had only been contact cleared for a handful of cycles. They were new. They were a Deathworld species, which sounds impressive until you learn what the conquered actually means by that word. A Deathworld isn't a world that makes strong warriors. A Deathworld is a world that's broken. Too hot, too cold, too much gravity, too many predators, poison in the water, poison in the air. Deathworld species are the ones who crawled up out of a nightmare and never quite left it behind. They're twitchy, aggressive, prone to what the medical branch politely called instability. That was the theory anyway. That was what the briefing said. Handle Deathworlders with caution. They do not process fear the way stable species do. So when the first human intake walked onto Deck 9 for orientation, 10,000 of us leaned forward to look. And what we saw was small. That was the word that went around. It rippled through the seats in 40 languages, all meaning the same thing. Small. That's it. That's the monster species. Because humans are small. To me they are anyway. The tallest man in that intake came up to about my collarbone, and most of them weren't even that. Soft-looking. Thin skin, you could see the blood moving under. No armor plates, no chitin, no venom sacs, no secondary heart. Just skin and hair and those flat little faces with two eyes crammed together on the front like they'd been assembled in a hurry. And in the middle of that first intake, standing near the back, was her. I didn't notice her at first. That's the truth, and I'm not ashamed of it. Nobody noticed her. She was maybe the smallest human in a group of small humans. Dark hair pulled back tight, skin a warm brown. She stood very still while the others fidgeted, and she kept her eyes moving, slow, careful, all around the room like she was mapping it. Her name was Anya Sekar. I want you to remember that name, cadets, because in about 6 weeks, every single being on that ring was going to be screaming it. They gave the humans the worst of everything. I want to be honest with you, because this is the part where my people don't come off well, and if I'm going to tell it, I'm going to tell it true. The humans got the smallest quarters, the oldest gear, instructors who didn't want them and made no secret of it. When a training slot came up, humans got assigned to it last. When the cafeteria ran short, and it ran short a lot, because feeding 200 species different diets is a logistics nightmare, humans got what was left. And they got Vashkar. You've heard of Vashkar, even if you don't know it. Anybody who's passed through the college in the last 20 cycles has heard the name whispered. Vashkar Dale Koran, the champion of Deck 9. He was Corinth. If you've never seen a Corinth in the flesh, imagine this. A body like a mountain that learned to walk. 9 feet at the shoulder, though they don't have shoulders quite the way you're imagining, more like a fused ridge of muscle and bone plate that ran from the base of the skull down the spine. 4 arms. 2 big ones for crushing, 2 smaller ones underneath for the fine work. Skin the color of old iron, hard as it too. A face that was mostly jaw. And Vashkar wasn't just any Corinth. He was the best fighter the college had produced in a generation, undefeated in the trials, 311 bouts, 311 wins. He'd broken cadets, not metaphorically. He put 4 beings in the medical branch's long-term ward, and the college had never once disciplined him for it, because in the trials, that's the point. You learn to fight by fighting the things that can actually hurt you. Vashkar walked the decks like he owned them, and in a way he did. He also hated the humans, from the first day, and I never fully understood why until much later. I think, and this is just an old friend's guess, I think it was because they weren't afraid of him. Everybody was afraid of Vashkar. You could smell it on the deck when he walked in. The fierce sense of 40 species all at once, that particular sour tang. It was like a drug to the Corinth, that fear. They feed on it a little in their own way. It tells them they're at the top. And the humans just looked at him. Looked at him like you'd look at bad weather. Something big and dangerous, sure, but also something you'd survived before and expected to survive again. That got under his plates, I'm sure of it. Anya Sekar was, by every measure the college used, the weakest cadet in the human intake. I know because they posted the rankings. Everybody's did. Great glowing boards in every corridor. Every cadet's scores lit up for all to see: strength trials, reflex trials, endurance, tactics, marksmanship. It was meant to motivate us. Mostly it just meant you knew exactly who to look down on. And Anya was at the bottom, not the bottom of the humans, the bottom of everyone. 200,000 cadets, and her strength score sat in the lowest 0.1%. She couldn't lift what a Thren child could lift. She lost every strength trial, every single one. She'd step up to the resistance bars, this small, dark-haired girl, and the machine would barely register her. The Vellani cadets used to gather to watch and make their wet clicking laughter. There was a video that went around. Somebody had recorded her failing a lift. The bar didn't move, not a fraction, and she just stood there straining and then let go and stepped back and wrote something in that little notebook she always carried. No anger, no tears, just wrote it down and walked away. The clip got passed around the whole ring, with a caption in trade tongue that translated roughly to Earth's finest. Cruel, it was cruel. I laughed at it too. I'm telling you the truth so you'll believe the rest. But here's the thing I noticed, even then, even while I was laughing. She kept the notebook. Every trial, win or lose, and it was always lose, she wrote in it. Numbers mostly. I saw it once over her shoulder in the mess. Columns of numbers and little sketches. I couldn't read the human script, but I could see the shape of it. It was the shape of somebody studying. Studying what? She was losing. What's to study in losing? I didn't understand yet, but I would. The thing about the resistance bars, and this is important, so stay with me, is that they measure the wrong thing. They measure how much force you can put out in one big push, one heave, maximum strength. And on most worlds, that's the number that matters. On a stable world, if you're stronger than the other creature, you win. Simple. The universe made sense that way for 1 billion years. But Earth isn't a stable world. I learned this later from the human instructor, the one they eventually assigned, a quiet older man named Cole who'd been a soldier before he was a teacher. I sat with him once near the end and I asked him. I said, How is it possible? She could not move the bar, I saw it. The bar did not move. And Cole gave me this tired little smile, the kind humans do with only half their mouth, and he said, You're testing whether she can push a wall. She's never going to push a wall. That's not what we're for. Then what are you for? He thought about it, then he said, We're for not stopping. I didn't understand it then. I understand it now. Let me explain it the way he explained it to me, because it's the whole key to everything that happened. On Earth, the real Earth, the death world, before all the cities, the humans were not the strongest thing. They weren't the fastest. They didn't have claws or fangs or armor. Everything that lived on that world could kill a human in a straight fight. Everything was stronger. So the humans did something no other species in the galaxy had ever done, because no other species had ever needed to. They learned to win the fight that isn't straight. They couldn't beat the fast animals in a sprint, so they hunted them by walking, just walking, all day, never stopping. They'd pick one animal and follow it at a walk, hour after hour in the killing heat, while the animal ran and rested, and the human just kept coming, never running, never resting, just this relentless upright shape appearing again and again on the horizon, until the animal's heart gave out and it fell down dead from exhaustion and terror, and the human walked up and took it. Cole told me his species has a name for this: persistence hunting. They are the only species in the known galaxy that evolved to outlast prey it could not overpower. Think about what that does to a mind, to a body, to a soul. Think about what kind of creature you become when your entire ancestry, going back 1 million years, is built on one single idea. I cannot beat you with strength, so I will simply refuse to stop before you do. That's what the resistance bar couldn't see. That's what we were all laughing at. We were measuring the push, and humans were never about the push. They were about the not stopping. The mockery got worse over those first weeks. I won't pretend I stood apart from it, so I'll tell you what I did and you can judge me. There was a day in the corridor, a group of us, me, 2 other Thren, a big Corinth Jr. of Vashkar's crew. We were coming off a trial, feeling large, feeling loud. And she was there, coming the other way. Anya, alone, notebook under her arm. And the Corinth Jr., Drask, his name was, stepped into her path, just planted himself. 900 pounds of iron-skinned muscle, blocking a girl who came up to his mid-thigh. Move, she said, just that, quiet. And Drask laughed his Warhum laugh and said, Make me Deathworlder. And here's what she did. She didn't try to shove past. She wasn't stupid. She looked up at him this long way up and she was quiet for a moment. And then she said in that flat, calm voice, Okay, I'll wait. And she sat down. Right there in the corridor, crossed her legs, opened her notebook, and started writing. Drask didn't know what to do. None of us did. He'd expected fear or anger or a fight. He'd have known what to do with any of those. But a small creature sitting down on the floor to wait him out, that wasn't in his instincts. There's no dominance move for that. You can't loom over someone who's decided that time is on their side. He stood there, she wrote. The moment stretched, and it started to feel, I remember this exactly, it started to feel like he was the one being tested. Like we all were. Like she'd turned the whole corridor into a trial and none of us had agreed to it and she was already winning. Drask made a disgusted noise and stepped over her and walked away. We followed, fast. Behind us, unhurried, she got up, brushed off her legs and went the other way. Nobody said anything for a while. Then one of the Thren muttered, "Weird little animal." And we laughed, but it was a nervous laugh, the kind you do to cover something you don't want to look at directly. I looked at my forearm that night. No scars yet. Those came later, but I remember looking and not knowing why. Here is how the challenge happened. This is the part everyone gets wrong, so listen close. They say Anya challenged Vashkar, that she marched up to the champion and demanded a bout. Makes a better legend that way, the little David striding up to the giant. It's not true. She never challenged him. She never would have. She wasn't stupid and she wasn't proud in that way. Humans have pride, but it's a strange kind, folded up small and hidden inside, not worn on the outside like the Corinth wear theirs. What actually happened is that Vashkar challenged her. And he did it to be cruel. It was in the mess. The big one, the central hall where all the intakes ate together because the college had some old dream about unity. Thousands of beings, all the tables, all the noise. And Vashkar came in with his crew, and he was in a mood. He'd been passed over for some honor guard posting. I heard later, and a Corinth in a foul mood is a dangerous weather system. He saw the humans at their corner table. The ones with the worst food in the worst corner, because that's where they always were. And he walked over. The hall went quiet in a spreading ring around him, the way it always did. You could track him through the crowd by the silence he pushed ahead of himself. He stopped at the human table, and he looked down at all of them, and then he looked at her, at Anya, the smallest one, the one at the bottom of every board, and he said loud, so the whole hall would hear it. "You bottom-ranked, weakest cadet on the ring." Anya looked up from her food, didn't stand, just looked up. "I've been watching your scores," Vashkar said. "You are the single weakest living thing at this college. Do you know that? Out of 200,000 you are last." He let that hang. "My species has a tradition. Before a hunt, the champion is meant to face a lesser creature, to remind himself what he is, a ritual." His jaw split in the Corinth version of a smile. "I choose you, the weakest, to honor the strongest. You will meet me in the trial circle, Deck 9, 2 days." The hall was so quiet you could hear the rings hum through the floor. And everyone waited for her to be afraid. That was the whole point, you see. That was the cruelty of it. He wasn't going to fight her seriously. He was going to display her. Pick up the smallest, weakest thing on the ring and break it in front of everyone and feed on the fierce scent of 10,000 cadets while he did it. A ritual, he called it. It was a public execution dressed up as tradition. And she was supposed to weep or beg or refuse, so he could enjoy that too. Anya set down her utensil. She looked at him for a long moment, this creature 4 times her size and 40 times her weight, this undefeated killer who had broken beings twice her size. And then she did the thing that I think, looking back, sealed everything that came after. She smiled. Not a big smile, a small one, almost gentle, almost, and I know how this sounds, almost kind. The way you'd smile at a child who'd said something they didn't understand. And she said quietly, but it carried, because the whole hall was dead silent. "Okay. That's all, just okay." And then she picked her utensil back up and went on eating. I need to tell you about the 2 days in between, because that's where I stopped laughing. That's where a lot of us did. The whole ring was talking about it. You couldn't walk 10 feet without hearing it. Odds were being run in the lower decks. Vashkar at numbers so lopsided the bookmakers stopped taking bets on him at all. The only question anybody was asking was how badly it would go. Would she survive? Would she be maimed? Some of the crueler cadets were placing bets on that, on how many bones, on how long she'd last. Seconds, most of them guessed. Everyone agreed it would be seconds. They were right about that part, at least. Now, everyone expected her to spend those 2 days one of 3 ways. Some thought she'd run, book passage off the ring, disappear, take the shame. Deserters happened. Nobody would have blamed a bottom-ranked death worlder for fleeing a champion. Some thought she'd break down, panic, beg the college to intervene. There was even a rule she could have invoked. A cadet could refuse a trial they deemed lethally unfair and take a mark of cowardice instead of a coffin. Plenty would have, most would have. And some thought she'd train, desperately, grind herself bloody at the resistance bars trying to close a gap that could not be closed, the way a drowning creature claws at water. She did none of those things. I know because I watched her. A lot of us did by then. Word had spread and there was this horrible fascination, like watching a small animal walk calmly toward a cliff. Here is what Anya Sekar did with her 2 days. She slept, properly, full rest cycles both nights. The Velani who bunked near the humans reported it with something like offense. She sleeps. She just sleeps like it's nothing. She ate carefully, measured. I watched her in the mess, choosing her food, weighing it in her hands, that notebook open beside her plate. And she watched Vashkar. That's the part that got me. That's the part I couldn't look away from. She went to Deck 9 both days during his training slots, and she sat in the seats up high, alone, and she watched him fight, bout after bout. And she wrote in the notebook, numbers, sketches. All the while, that flat, calm focus, those slow, careful eyes moving over him like she was taking him apart and laying the pieces out to study. I sat near her once, on the second day. I don't know why, some pull I didn't have a name for. I climbed up to her row and sat a few seats down, and she didn't look at me, and I didn't look at her, and we both watched Vashkar break a Sift cadet's arm in the circle below. And after a while, without turning her head, she said, "He drops his lower left." I nearly fell off the bench. She was talking to me. "What?" I said. "His lower left arm." She still didn't look at me. Her eyes were on the circle. Every time he commits to a strike with the big arms, the lower left drops just for a moment. He's done it in every fight I've watched, 240 times. She tapped the notebook. He doesn't know he does it. Nobody's ever made him pay for it, so it never got corrected. He's too strong. He's never needed to fix it. I stared at her. "You cannot win," I told her. I don't know why I said it. Maybe I wanted to warn her. Maybe I wanted to be right. "You know this. You are the weakest cadet on the ring. He is the strongest. There is no count you can make that changes this. He will hit you one time and you will die." And she finally turned her head and looked at me, and her eyes weren't afraid. They weren't angry. They were curious almost, like I'd said something interesting. "You keep saying strongest and weakest like they're the only two things," she said, "like it's the only axis." She turned back to the circle. "Where I'm from, the strongest thing isn't the thing that wins. The strongest thing is usually the thing that dies first. Fast, confident, and dead." A pause. "You want to know what wins on my world?" I didn't answer. She told me anyway. "The thing that's still standing when everyone else has stopped." And below us, Vashka roared, and the crowd roared back, and the Sift cadet was carried out, and Anya Sekar wrote one more number in her notebook and closed it. The morning of the trial, Deck 9 was fuller than I had ever seen it. Not just cadets. Instructors came, branch officers. Even a few of the college's governing council took seats in the high dark, which never happened, not for a first-year bout. Word had traveled beyond the ring by then. There were feeds, there were watchers on member worlds. The whole galaxy, it felt like, had heard that the weakest cadet in the Conquered was about to be publicly destroyed by its champion, and the whole galaxy wanted to watch. 12,000 beings in those seats, maybe more. The noise was a physical thing. It pressed on you. 40 species worth of anticipation, that sweet-trot Vellani nerve scent thick in the air, the Corinth war hum rolling under everything like the ring itself was growling. I got a seat low. Close. I don't know how, I think some part of me pushed for it, some part that had stopped laughing days ago and needed to see this up close, needed to understand the thing I couldn't stop thinking about. The circle lit up. Black impact glass, ringed in white light, the space where the fighting happened. A ref drone hovered above it, though everyone knew the ref was a formality. In about this lopsided, the ref was there to declare a death, not prevent one. Vashkar came in first. He came in the way a storm comes in. His crew hammered their chests, the Corinth in the crowd took up the war hum, and he walked into the light and turned in a slow circle with all four arms raised, and 12,000 beings screamed for him. He soaked it up. The fear and the worship all mixed together, you could see it feeding him, see him growing somehow larger in the white light. He was magnificent, I'll say that. He was a terrible, magnificent thing, and in that moment watching him, even I forgot her count. Even I thought, there is no answer to this. There is nothing she can do. He is going to kill her and the galaxy is going to watch. And then she came in. And the strangest thing happened. The stadium went quiet. Not out of respect. Out of I don't know the word in your language, out of the sheer wrongness of the sight. She looked so small down there. Smaller than ever in the white light with that mountain of iron muscle looming across the circle. She wore plain training grays. No armor. Her dark hair pulled back tight. That notebook, she'd left it at the edge of the circle, closed, resting on the rail like she'd finished with it, like she'd already learned everything it could teach her. She walked to the center, calm, those slow eyes taking one last pass around the whole roaring deck, and then settling on him. And she stood there, small still, waiting. The ref drone chimed. It spoke the ritual words, the ones that basically mean the college is not responsible for what happens in this circle. Vashkar laughed, that warhum laugh huge, filling the deck. He lifted his four arms and turned to the crowd one more time and roared. Behold the strongest and the WKSD, and watch me show you the difference. 12,000 voices answered him. And through all of it, Anya Sekar didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched him, watched his lower left arm. The ref drone chimed again. The bout was live. Vashkar turned back to her, still grinning that split-jaw grin, in no hurry, savoring it, and he took one slow, heavy step toward the weakest cadet on the ring. I have thought about the next few seconds every day of my life since. I'm going to tell them to you slow, slower than they happened, because they happened fast, faster than the crowd could follow, faster than the ref drone could log it clean, and if I tell it fast, you'll miss the thing that matters. And the thing that matters isn't the speed. It's what she was doing while everyone else was watching the speed. So slow. Vashkar took his step. One heavy step toward the center, and the whole deck felt it through the floor. He wasn't rushing. Why would he rush? You don't rush at a thing you're going to break. You walk up to it. You let it feel you coming. He'd done this 311 times, and 311 times the thing across the circle had done what things do when a mountain walks toward them. They'd backed up, or braced, or thrown the first strike out of fear, wild and early, and given him the opening he wanted. Anya did none of that. She walked toward him. I heard the crowd's noise change. It's a thing I'll never forget, 12,000 voices, all making the same small, confused sound at the same moment, this low, uneven huh that rippled around the deck. Because it was wrong. Prey doesn't walk toward the predator. Nothing in the galaxy walks toward the predator. It's not a decision any stable mind makes. But she wasn't a stable mind. She was a death worlder. And on a death world, sometimes the only move left is the one nothing expects. Because everything that made the expected moves already died. She walked toward him, calm, unhurried, closing the distance he thought was his to close. And it rattled him. I saw it. Just for a flicker, a hitch in that heavy, confident stride, a tiny tilt of that great-jawed head like "What are you doing?" For half a heartbeat, the champion of Deck 9 didn't know what was happening in his own circle. Then his pride caught up, and he decided to end it. He committed. He drew back both big arms, the crushing arms, the mountain arms, the ones that had put 4 beings in the long-term ward, and he brought them down in the killing strike, the one that finishes it, the one that had finished it every time before. It was enormous. It was final. 12,000 beings sucked in one breath together. And his lower left arm dropped. Just like she said, just for a moment. That old buried flaw, the one nobody had ever made him pay for, the one he didn't even know he had because he'd never in his life needed to fix anything. He was too strong. Strength had let him stay sloppy for 311 fights. She'd counted it 240 times. She knew it was coming before he did. And here is where the seconds live. Here is the whole thing. Listen. She didn't try to block the killing strike. You can't block a mountain. She'd never once, in all her counting, believed she could stop his force. That was never the plan. Everyone in that stadium was watching to see whether the small thing could survive the big thing's power, and that was the wrong question, and she'd known it was the wrong question from the first day at the resistance bars. She wasn't there to survive his strength. She was there to be somewhere his strength wasn't. As those crushing arms came down, she was already gone from where they were falling, not backward, inward, stepping into him, into the one place a strike that size can't reach, close against his own body where all that terrible force swung past her and hit nothing but air and glass. The floor cracked white where the blow landed, where she'd been a quarter second before. And in that same motion, the same single flowing motion, so smooth it didn't look like two things, she went for the dropped arm. Not to hit it. She couldn't hurt him. She weighed a fraction of what he did. A punch from her was a joke and she knew it. She took it. She got both her small hands around that lower left wrist as it hung there exposed, and she didn't pull against his strength. She went with it, using the momentum he'd already put into the strike, all that mass still traveling downward, and she turned it, rolled it. A small, precise twist at exactly the angle. A Corinth's lower joint is not built to travel, using his own 900 pounds of committed force against the one part of him he'd left undefended. I heard it. Over 12,000 screaming voices, I heard it. A sound like a green branch breaking underwater, wet and deep and final. Vashkar's lower left arm folded the wrong way. And the champion of Deck 9, the undefeated, the terrible, magnificent mountain, screamed. He went down. Not all at once. First to one knee, the wrecked arm clutched against him, that iron-hard body that had never known damage suddenly full of it. His other 3 arms flailing, reaching for her, but she wasn't where they reached. She was never where they reached. She'd already flowed to the outside, staying in the dead space, that patient, relentless shape that appears again and again where you don't expect it. And she took his balance. That's the second thing. That's what nobody saw because they were all still processing the arm. A being that big, once it's down on one knee and screaming and off-center, its whole architecture depends on balance, on those 4 points of contact, and she'd taken one of them and she knew, she'd counted, exactly how the weight would shift. A small shove at exactly the right place isn't strength. It's timing. It's knowing where the mountain is already about to fall and just helping it get there. He went down on his side. 9 feet of Corinth champion, flat on the black glass in the white light, in front of 12,000 beings and the whole watching galaxy. Flat on his back. And she was on him, not striking. She never struck him, not once, not one blow, remember that, it matters. She was simply there, a knee across the base of his throat ridge where the plating thins, one small hand controlling the wrecked arm so any movement sent fresh agony through it. Her whole weight arranged with that same terrible precision at the exact points where all his strength couldn't reach and all his size didn't help. He was 4 times her mass, 40 times her strength. And he could not move. because she wasn't fighting his strength. She was standing on the places it couldn't go. The ref drone was chiming, frantic. The ritual words tumbling out, yield, yield. Does the fighter yield? And Vashkar thrashed once, twice, roaring, and every thrash cost him. And she rode it, patient, immovable, that flat, calm face inches from his, waiting. Just waiting. The way she'd waited in the corridor. The way her whole species had waited on a killing plane 1,000,000 years ago, walking after something faster and stronger, never running, never stopping, just there and there and there again, until the strong, fast thing's heart gave out and it fell down and stopped. She could wait longer than he could fight. That was the whole answer. That was the only answer she'd ever needed. Vashkar understood it too. I watched it reach his eyes. That's the moment I'll take to my death, the moment the champion of Deck 9 looked up at the weakest cadet on the ring and understood, finally in his ruined body, what he was actually looking at. Not a small weak thing at all. A thing that does not stop. He yielded. The war hum choked in his throat and he made the sound, the Corinth yield sound, low and broken, and the ref drone flared gold, and it was over. The whole thing, start to finish, from his first step to his yield. 9 seconds. I counted later off the feed, 9 seconds. They mocked Earth's weakest girl cadet, and she crushed their champion in 9 seconds, and I was close enough to hear his arm break, and I will never, ever forget the sound. But that's not the part I tell the young ones for. The seconds are what people want. The seconds are what made the feeds, the seconds are the legend, the seconds are why you already knew this story before I started telling it. Fine, good, the seconds were real. But here's the part that made me roll up my sleeve for 40 years. Here's the part that actually changed me. It's what she did after he yielded. Because a Corinth yield in the trial circle, that doesn't mean what you'd think. There's an old cruelty baked into the ritual. When a champion falls, the victor has the right. It's called the claiming. You can take from the defeated whatever mark you choose, break another joint, take an eye, brand them, whatever you want the crowd to see. Vashkar himself had done it. 4 beings in the long-term ward, remember. He'd claimed every one of them. That's how he'd built the fear that fed him. So when he yielded, 12,000 beings leaned forward hungry because now they knew what she was and they wanted to see her take it. Take his eye, take his other arm, break the mountain the rest of the way and stand on the pieces. He'd earned it. He'd have done it to her without a flicker. The whole deck was already roaring for it, that sweet-rot bloodlust scent thick enough to choke on. And Anya Sekar knelt on the throat of the being who tried to publicly execute her for sport. And she let go. She took her weight off him. She released the wrecked arm carefully, the way you'd set down something fragile. She stood up, and she stepped back out of the claiming range, hands open at her sides, giving up the right the whole galaxy was screaming for her to use. The deck didn't understand. The roar broke into confusion, that same uneven high rolling around the seats. The ref drone hovered, uncertain, waiting for the claim that wasn't coming. And she looked down at him, at Vashkar, broken and beaten and flat on the glass, staring up at her with an expression I had never once seen on a Corinth face. Not rage, not even shame. Fear, real fear. The thing he'd fed on his whole life, finally turned around and living in his own eyes. And Anya said something to him. The feed didn't catch it, too much crowd noise, and she said it low just for him. But I was close. I was low and close, and I've replayed the shape of her mouth against everything I know, and I am as sure as I've ever been of anything that what she said was this. I don't need to break you, I already won. And then she added something else, quieter, and this part I'm less sure of, but I believe it because of everything that came after. I believe, she said. Where I'm from, we don't kill the ones who yield. We remember that they yielded, so do better. Then she turned her back on him, turned her back on a wounded Corinth champion, the single most dangerous thing to do in that circle, and did it without a flicker of worry, because she understood him completely now and knew he was done. and she walked to the rail, and she picked up her notebook. And she left the circle. I want to tell you what the silence was like. 12,000 beings, 40 species, and for a moment none of them made a sound. The Corinth war hum had stopped. The Villani clicking had stopped. Even the ring's own hum seemed to drop. It was the quietest I ever heard Deck 9 before or since. And then a sound started that I had never heard in that stadium. It started small. In the human corner, the worst corner with the worst food, the other cadets from Earth, the small soft ones we'd all laughed at, they started it. A human sound. They struck their hands together, palm against palm, over and over, this sharp rhythmic crack. Applause, I learned it was called. A death world sound. The sound humans make when they've seen something worth remembering. And then, and I still don't fully understand how, it spread. A SIFT cadet took it up, whistling the closest their throat could come. Then a whole row of Villani drumming it on the benches. Then the Thren near me, my own people, began to stamp, that great heavy Thren stamp that shakes a floor, and I found my own feet stamping before my mind had decided to. And I was stamping, and my chest was tight, and my eyes stung, and I did not have a name for what I was feeling. 12,000 beings, all making the sounds of their own worlds at once, all meaning the same thing. Not for the seconds, not for the broken arm. For the mercy. For the small dark-haired girl who'd earned the right to break a mountain and chosen, in front of the whole galaxy, to set it down instead. That's the sound I still hear when I close my eyes, not the arm breaking, that thunder. That whole roaring wheel of worlds on its feet for the weakest cadet on the ring. She didn't gloat, that's the thing about her, all the way through. There was no victory lap. She walked out through the tunnel with her notebook under her arm, same as she'd walked in, and I heard she went straight back to quarters and slept a full rest cycle. Ate a measured meal, wrote in the notebook. I asked Cole about that later, the human instructor, the tired old soldier. I asked him why she wasn't celebrating. She'd just become the most famous cadet in the Concord. Why go back and sleep? And he gave me that half-mouth smile and he said, because it's done. She solved it. You don't celebrate a solved problem. You rest and you get ready for the next one. He looked at me. That's what you keep not understanding about us, big man. We're not in it for the moment we win. We're in it for the next morning. We just keep showing up. That's the whole trick. That's all it ever was. That's all it ever was. I've turned that over for 40 years. Vashkar healed. The arm never fully came back. Corinth joints don't. Once they've gone the wrong way, and he fought again, but he was never the champion after that. Couldn't be. Once the fear was gone from the deck, once everyone had seen the mountain fall, the thing that fed him was starved. He faded. Last I heard, he'd left the trial circle entirely and gone into logistics of all things, moving supplies, a quiet life. But here's the part that gets me. He never spoke against her. Not once. In all the cycles after, with all the chances he had to call it a fluke, a trick, a lucky joint, he never did. And once, years on, a young Corinth cadet asked him about it directly, in the mess, asked how the weakest cadet on the ring had beaten the greatest champion in a generation. And Vashkar, old now, one arm hanging wrong, was quiet a long moment. And then he said something I've carried ever since. He said, she didn't beat the greatest champion. She showed me I was never the greatest anything. I was just the strongest thing in a room full of things weaker than me. I mistook that for being unbeatable. He looked at the young one. The moment something walked in that I couldn't outmuscle, I had nothing. No craft, no patience, nothing underneath the strength. She had spent her whole life with nothing but what's underneath. A pause. Do not be the strongest thing in the room, cadet. Be the thing that would still be standing if the strength went away. That from Vashkar. From the mountain she broke and set down. She'd told him to do better, and he had. Anya Sekar graduated top of her cohort. Not on strength, she finished last in strength every cycle she was there, right to the end, and never once seemed to care. But on everything else, tactics, endurance, adaptation, the things the resistance bars couldn't measure, The things that actually win the fights that aren't straight. She went on to things I'm not cleared to tell you about, out in the dark on the line, holding it, the line all of us trained to hold. I heard stories. Everyone did. Some of them are probably even true. But I never saw her again after the college. I want to be honest about that. I'm not going to pretend I knew her. I sat 2 seats down from her once, and she told me a Corinth drops his lower left arm, and I watched her break a mountain and choose not to, and that's the whole of my claim on her. It was enough. It was enough to change the shape of my life. So that's the story. The real one. Not the one where she was 7 feet tall with glowing eyes. The one where she was the smallest, weakest, lowest-ranked cadet on a ring of 200,000, and every one of those measurements was true, and every one of them was measuring the wrong thing. The young ones always ask me the same question at the end. They ask, but what was her secret? What was the trick? How did the weakest thing win? And I tell them the truth, which is that there was no secret and no trick. She just understood something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten because it had never needed to learn it. The strongest thing in the room is not the thing that wins. The strongest thing in the room is usually just the thing that hasn't lost yet, the thing that got there by outmuscling everything smaller and mistook that for a truth about the universe. And the day something walks in that it can't outmuscle, all that strength is just weight, just mass with nothing underneath it. The thing that wins, the thing that actually, finally wins, is the thing that's still standing when everyone else has stopped. She was never the weakest cadet on the ring. We just didn't have a machine that could measure the only strength that ever mattered. I roll my sleeve back down now. 3 white scars, not from her. From me, from the day in the corridor when I couldn't look at what she was, a small quiet thing sitting down on the floor to wait us out, already winning, and none of us big strong creatures with any idea how to fight something that simply refused to stop. I understand it now. I hope before your own line comes to hold, you understand it too. Because out there in the dark, when the strong, fast, terrible things come, and they will come, it won't be the strongest of us that holds. It'll be the ones who don't stop. It always was.